Admiral Vel'Kor stood on the observation deck of the dreadnought Kreshvar, his armored claws tapping rhythmically against the polished obsidian rail. The twin suns of the Zorith system burned bright in the viewport, casting long shadows across the bridge crew below. He was a towering figure, his exoskeleton etched with the scars of a dozen campaigns, each mark a testament to his unyielding command of the Vexery fleet. Earth, that whispered fable from ancient probe data, a primitive rock orbiting a backwater star, nothing more than spacer tall tales to amuse the recruits. Vel'Kor had dismissed it years ago, just as he dismissed the scouts' vague reports of anomalous signals from Sol. Myths didn't conquer empires. Below him, Captain Lirich pulsed with quiet efficiency, her tendrils weaving through holographic displays as she coordinated the Armada's maneuvers. She was his second, cautious where he was bold, her bioluminescent markings flickering in patterns that betrayed her unease. Admiral, the outer patrols report no contacts. The system is clear for the resupply operation. Her voice hummed through the comms, steady but laced with the subtle vibration of doubt. Vel'Kor grunted in approval, his multifaceted eyes scanning the starfield. The Vexery needed this depot. Their crusade against the fractured alliances of the Outer Rims demanded fuel, munitions, endless resources. Zorith's shipyards would provide or they would burn. A junior officer, Ensign Kale, approached from the side, his carapace still unmarked by battle, carrying the eagerness of youth. He was witty in the mess halls, quick with a quip to lighten the grim rotations, but here he moved with precision. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up a gravitational anomaly at the system's edge. Could be debris from the last skirmish. Vel'Kor turned, his mandibles clicking dismissively. Debris doesn't warp space, Ensign. Calibrate the arrays. False echoes from the sun's flares, nothing more. Kale nodded, retreating to his station, though his tendrils twitched with unspoken questions. The deck hummed with activity as the fleet settled into orbit. Shuttles darted like insects toward the orbital platforms, laden with cargo drones. Vel'Kor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This was order, the inexorable advance of the Vexery Dominion. Lyrid joined him at the rail, her gaze fixed on the suns. The myths persist in the archives, Admiral. Old data speaks of a species there, humans they called themselves. Aggressive, inventive. But no fleet, no empire. He chuckled, a low rumble in his throat. Inventive enough to hide behind their rock, perhaps. If they exist, they're no threat to us. Alarms blared suddenly, sharp and insistent, cutting through the calm. The viewport darkened, not gradually but as if a vast shadow had swallowed the light. Vel'Kor's claws tightened on the rail. Report. Lyridage's displays erupted in red, her tendrils flaring. Massive occlusion, Admiral. Something enormous is entering the system, blocking both suns. It's not natural. Sensors show ships. Thousands. Kale's voice cracked over the comms from below. They're human markings, sir. Confirmed from the archives. Earth isn't a myth. Vel'Kor stared into the encroaching void, the starfield eclipsed by an armada that dwarfed his own. Hulls gleamed with unfamiliar alloys, engines thrumming with power that bent gravity itself. Primitive? Oh. This was a storm unleashed. His mandibles parted in a rare flicker of alarm as the first human vessel locked weapons on the Kreshvar. The myth had come to claim its due. Vel'Kor paced the command deck of the Eternal Vigil, his armored boots clanging against the polished obsidian floor. The bridge hummed with the low thrum of diagnostic arrays, each console flickering with data streams from the Outer Rim patrols. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Zark, stood rigidly at her station, her multifaceted eyes darting between readouts. She was cautious by nature, always double-checking calibrations, but today her fingers hovered too long over the controls, betraying unease. Admiral, she said, her voice a clipped buzz through the translator implant. The third patrol has confirmed it. Anomalous gravitational perturbations in the heliopause. Not debris from the last skirmish with the Krell. Something denser, moving with purpose. Vel'Kor halted, his mandibles clicking in irritation. He'd spent cycles debunking those ridiculous tales of a hidden world called Earth, a fable peddled by rogue traders to explain away failed expeditions. Humans, soft-skinned bipeds with delusions of grandeur, didn't exist beyond nursery holograms. His empire spanned a dozen systems. Myths didn't breach its borders. Show me, he growled, striding to the central holo display. The projection bloomed into life, a starfield dotted with his fleet's icons. But there, edging the display like a shadow creeping over dawn, was a cluster of unidentified signatures. Dozens, no hundreds, of vessels, their silhouettes blocky and unfamiliar, accelerating toward the inner system. They weren't sleek like Vexarian cruisers or jagged like Krell raiders. These were utilitarian, armored in layers that screamed improvised resilience. Zard leaned in, her breath hissing softly. They're masking their emissions, Admiral. Energy signatures are primitive, fusion drives maybe, but the scale, it's blotting out the sensor net. If they maintain vector, they'll eclipse the primary sun within hours. Vel'Kor's grip tightened on the console edge, the metal groaning under his claws. Eclipse the sun? Preposterous. His homeworld of Zorth Prime orbited a binary pair. Blocking one would plunge half the planet into artificial night, disrupting harvests, stirring panic in the hives. He activated the fleet-wide channel. All commands, this is Admiral Vel'Kor. Deploy interceptors to Grid 7 Alpha. Identify and hail these intruders. Fair pirates, vaporize them. If there's something else, he trailed off, the words tasting like ash. Interceptors launched in synchronized bursts, their plasma trails streaking across the void. Zardich monitored the feeds, her caution fracturing into urgency. Response incoming, sir. They're broadcasting on open frequency, audio only, no visual. The speakers crackled, and a voice emerged, steady and human-like, laced with an accent that rolled like distant thunder. This is Captain Elena Reyes of the United Earth Defense Force. We come in peace, but we will not be fired upon. Stand down your weapons, Admiral Vel'Kor, or face the consequences of your empire's aggressions. Vel'Kor froze. United Earth? The myth speaking. His mandibles flared wide. Hail them back. Demand coordinates and proof of origin. And ready the Vigil's main batteries. As Zardich complied, the holo-display updated. The intruders weren't slowing. Their formation tightened, a wall of hulls expanding like a solar sail unfurling. One interceptor pinged a close pass. Returned fire singed its wing, but the human craft didn't pursue. They just kept coming, inexorable. Zard glanced up, her eyes gleaming with rare defiance. They're not bluffing, Admiral. Our simulations show their mass alone could destabilize the orbital rings if they get closer. Vel'Kor nodded curtly, masking the chill creeping along his exoskeleton. For the first time in decades, the stars felt smaller, hemmed in by shadows of his own dismissal. He turned to the viewport where the twin suns burned bright for now. Evasive protocols. Protect the core worlds. And Zart, prepare evacuation contingencies for the flagship. Vel'Kor gripped the armrests of his command throne, the polished obsidian cool against his scaled palms. The bridge hummed with the low thrum of failing systems, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of his crew. Ensign Tira, his ever-cautious communications officer, hunched over her console, her frilled crest flattened in distress. Admiral, the interference is worsening. It's not just jamming our signals, it's bending light itself around the fleet. He waved a clawed hand dismissively, though doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Myths didn't bend light. Earth was a fable, a human tall tale peddled by rogue traders to scare impressionable young officers like Tira. But the view screen told a different story. The twin suns of the Zirian system, usually blazing like twin forges, now dimmed behind an unnatural veil. A shadow vast and deliberate creeping across the void. Status on the perimeter sensors? Vel'Kor barked, his voice steady despite the knot in his gut. Lieutenant Kor, the burly engineer with a wit as sharp as his tools, wiped sweat from his brow ridge. Offline, sir. Whatever this is, it's frying them from the inside out. Like it's probing us. The Admiral rose, his armored robes whispering against the deck. He paced to the central holo-display, where a swirling mass of data painted the intruder as a colossal silhouette, irregular, almost organic in its sprawl. Not a ship, not a weapon. Something bigger. His mind raced back to the intercepted transmission from the outer colonies, garbled words about human ghosts rising from the dark. He'd laughed it off in briefings, but now? Evacuate non-essentials to the auxiliary decks, he ordered, turning to face his bridge crew. Tira's eyes widened, her fingers flying across her panel. Admiral, if we pull back, we leave the mining outposts exposed. The council can court-martial me later, Vel'Kor cut in, his tone brooking no argument. Right now, survival trumps protocol. Kor nodded grimly, already rerouting power to the forward shields. The man had a cautious streak, always double-checking his repairs, but under pressure he moved like a storm, efficient, unyielding. A shudder ran through the vanguard, the flagship's hull groaning as the shadow deepened. Alarms blared, sharp and insistent, cutting through the tension like claws on metal. Vel'Kor stared at the screen, the sun's light fracturing into prismatic shards against the encroaching dark. For the first time in his storied career, the Admiral felt small, adrift in a cosmos that no longer answered to his commands. Tira's voice cracked over the calm, "Incoming hail, sir. Encrypted, but it's in baseline galactic. Demanding we stand down." "Patch it through," Vel'Kor said, steeling himself. The audio crackled to life, a human voice, calm, accented with that peculiar Earthside drawl, filling the bridge. "This is Captain Elena Reyes of the United Terran Fleet. Your operations in Xerian space end now. Power down weapons and prepare to be boarded." The words hung in the air, heavier than the shadow outside. Vel'Kor exchanged a glance with Kor, whose jaw tightened. Earth wasn't a myth. It was here, blotting out the stars, and it had come prepared. The Admiral's claws dug into his palms. Time to adapt, or be eclipsed. The bridge hummed with the low thrum of emergency protocols, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of his crew. Reports flooded in from every station. Sensor arrays blind, navigation charts rewriting themselves in frantic bursts of data. The anomaly, that impossible shadow eclipsing the twin suns of the Krellian system, had grown. It wasn't just blocking light now. It was devouring it, pulling at the fabric of space like a predator's maw. "Admiral," Lieutenant Sira hissed from her console, her frilled crest flaring in agitation. "Defensive grid is at full capacity. We've rerouted power from life support, but the strain..." "Enough," Vel'Kor cut her off, his voice a gravelly rumble that echoed off the bulkheads. He rose, his towering frame unfolding with deliberate grace, the weight of his armored robes settling like a mantle of authority. Sira was cautious to a fault, always calculating risks before leaping, but today her warnings grated like sand in his gills. They needed action, not hesitation. "Status on the probe launch?" Engineer Torv, the wiry one with the perpetual squint from years in engine bays, punched a sequence into his panel. Sparks danced from an overloaded circuit, but he didn't flinch. "Pods away, sir. 3 recon units armed with quantum lancers. They'll punch through whatever's out there and relay visuals in 30 cycles." Vel'Kor nodded, his multifaceted eyes narrowing at the main view screen. The shadow loomed, a colossal silhouette against the fading glare of the suns. A sphere vast and unyielding, ringed by what looked like artificial constructs. Platforms, weapons. Myths didn't build empires. He dismissed the old spacer tales of a hidden world called Earth, a rogue planet teeming with soft-skinned bipeds who defied the stars with crude ingenuity. But this was no natural event. The gravitational pull was tugging at the Dreadspire's hull, a subtle vibration that set his teeth on edge. The bridge doors hissed open, admitting Captain Lyra, her stride clipped and efficient. She was the witty one, quick with a barb to lighten the dread, but her humor was absent now, replaced by the tight line of her jaw. "Scouts report incoming debris from the outer belts, Admiral. Asteroids pulled into unstable orbits. If that thing shifts even a degree, we'll have a meteor storm on our flanks." "Adapt or die," Vel'Kor muttered, echoing the creed of the Krellian fleet. He turned to the holographic display, where simulated trajectories painted a grim picture. Their battle group boxed in, escape vectors narrowing like a noose. The early plan, flanking maneuvers to probe the shadow's edges, had backfired spectacularly. The first wing of fighters had vanished into the void, their signals winking out as if swallowed whole. No wreckage, no distress calls. Just silence. Sira's console beeped urgently. "Admiral. Probe feed incoming." The view screen flickered, resolving into grainy images from the lead pod. There it was, the sphere in stark detail, a blue-green marble swirled with white clouds, orbiting a distant yellow star that seemed to pulse with unnatural energy. Structures dotted its surface, sprawling networks of lights, vast metallic spines piercing the atmosphere. And then, the pod sensors caught something else. Movement. Sleek vessels, not Krellian curves but blocky, angular designs swarming from hidden bays like angry insects. By the void, Torv whispered, his squint widening. They're launching interceptors. Human signatures confirmed, energy profiles match the archives. Vel'Kor felt a chill ripple down his spines. The myths were real and they were armed. The probe's feed jittered as lances of plasma fire lanced out, the human ships weaving with impossible precision. One interceptor clipped the pod, sending it spinning, but not before capturing a final haunting image. A banner fluttering on a distant platform, emblazoned with a simple emblem. A circle of blue on black, defiant against the stars. The feed cut to static. Alarms wailed as the dread spire shuddered, the shadows pull intensifying. Vel'Kor slammed a fist on the console. All hands, battle stations. Lyra, coordinate with the fleet, tight formation, shields interlocking. Torv, boost engines, we're not waiting for their welcome party. Lyra saluted, her eyes gleaming with that spark of grit he relied on. Aye, sir. But if these humans are half as stubborn as the tales say, we're in for a fight that rewrites the stars. As the crew scrambled, Vel'Kor stared into the encroaching dark. The cost was mounting, ships lost, systems strained, the twin suns dimming like forgotten gods. But retreat wasn't in his blood. If Earth was myth made manifest, he'd drag it into the light, or die eclipsed by its shadow. The deck plates groaned under the strain, a reminder that the void forgave no illusions. The bridge hummed with the low thrum of failing systems, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of his officers. Outside the viewport, the void twisted unnaturally, as if space itself recoiled from the human vessels that had materialized like ghosts from the outer rim. 3 of their wedge-shaped behemoths now flanked his flagship, the Dread Sovereign, their hulls scarred from battles Vel'Kor could only guess at, engines flaring with a blue-white fury that outshone the binary suns of Krell Prime. Admiral, Lieutenant Sira hissed from her station, her frills quivering with barely contained alarm. Their weapons arrays are charging. Point defense grids locked on our escorts. If we don't maneuver, silence, Vel'Kor snapped, his voice a gravelly rumble that echoed through the chamber. He wouldn't let panic seep in, not now. For cycles he'd ridiculed the tales of Terra. Primitive primates huddled on a backwater rock, their fleet, a fable spun by frightened scouts. Yet here they were, blotting out the stars, their formation a precise noose around his task force. The myth had teeth and they were bared. He leaned forward, studying the tactical hologram flickering before him. The humans' ships moved with an eerie coordination, no wasteful flourishes, just relentless advance. His own fleet, 20 cruisers, each a pinnacle of Zenthari engineering, had scattered the initial probes, but these newcomers adapted faster than any foe he'd faced. One of his destroyers, the Iron Fong, had already vented atmosphere from a glancing hit, its crew silenced in an instant. Divert power to forward shields, Vel'Kor ordered, his mind racing through contingencies. Recall the outer pickets. Form a wedge, push through their left flank. It was a gamble. The human sensors pierced their jamming fields as if they were missed, but retreat wasn't an option. Krell Prime lay just beyond, its shipyards vital to the Empire's expansion. Losing it would mean disgrace or worse. Sira's claws clicked rapidly over her console. Relaying orders, sir. But their lead vessel, it's broadcasting on open channels. Audio only. Shall I patch it through? Vel'Kor hesitated, then nodded curtly. Let the primitives posture. A burst of static filled the bridge, followed by a human voice, calm, accented with an unfamiliar lilt but laced with steel. This is Captain Elena Reyes of the UNS Vanguard. Admiral Vel'Kor, your aggression ends here. Stand down your weapons or we'll demonstrate why myths become legends. The words hung in the air, defiant and unyielding. Vel'Kor's frills flared in outrage. How dare they address him by name? His intelligence had been thorough. These humans knew more than they should. Respond, he growled. Tell them the Zenthari Dominion claims this sector by right of conquest. They are trespassers on Imperial space. Sira complied, her transmission clipped and formal. The reply came swiftly, the human captain's tone unchanging. Conquest? We've seen your handiwork on a dozen worlds, ruins and chains. We're here to even the scales. Last warning, power down or we will. Vel'Kor smashed a fist against the throne, the impact reverberating through the deck. Even the scales. The audacity burned hotter than plasma fire. All ships engage. Target their engines. Cripple, don't destroy. We take prisoners for interrogation. Alarms wailed as the dread sovereign shuddered into motion, thrusters firing in unison with the fleet. Laser lances streaked from Zenthari batteries, painting the void in crimson arcs. The humans evaded with impossible grace, their ships rolling aside like leaves in a gale, counterfire blooming from railguns that punched through armor like needles through silk. One bolt sheared the wing from a Zenthari frigate, sending it tumbling end over end toward the nearest sun. On the bridge, sparks erupted from an overloaded panel, singeing an ensign's uniform. Vel'Kor ignored the chaos, his eyes fixed on the hologram where the human formation tightened, inexorably closing the gap. They weren't charging blindly. Each maneuver exploited a weakness in his lines as if they'd mapped his tactics in advance. Sweat beaded beneath his scales. Impossible for a Zenthari of his rank. Flank breached, Admiral. Syrah shouted, pointing to the display. The vanguard had slipped past the outer cordon, its escorts laying down suppressive fire that forced two cruisers to divert. Debris fields bloomed where shields failed, twisting metal glinting in the starlight. Vel'Kor rose, pacing to the viewport. The human ships loomed larger now, their prows etched with unfamiliar sigils. Eagles, perhaps symbols of forgotten predators. He could almost feel the weight of their gaze, probing, unblinking. For the first time in his long career, doubt clawed at his resolve. These weren't the fumbling upstarts of legend. They were forged in fire, their ingenuity a blade honed across light years. Redirect fire to the vanguard, he commanded, voice steady despite the turmoil. Full barrage. Show them the Dominion's might. The fleet obeyed, a symphony of destruction unleashing toward the human flagship. Missiles swarmed like angry hornets, energy beams converging in a deadly lattice. The vanguard absorbed the onslaught, its hull glowing under the assault, but it pressed on, unbroken, unrelenting. A secondary explosion rocked the dread sovereign, tilting the bridge as inertial dampeners struggled. In that moment, as the humans closed to knife fight range, Vel'Kor realized the myth's true horror. Earth hadn't come to block his sons. It had come to eclipse them entirely. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Odyssey's engines vibrating through her bones like a distant storm. The view screen flickered with sensor data, painting the void in stark reds and blues. Kor's fleet closing in, their wedge-shaped cruisers forming a noose around the human armada. She glanced at Reyes, her chief engineer, who was hunched over a console, fingers dancing across holographic readouts. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his eyes burned with that unyielding focus she relied on. Status on the grav shield? Elara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Reyes didn't look up. Holding at 60%. Those bastards are pounding it with plasma lances. If we divert power from the mains we might buy time, but it'll leave weapons offline. Behind them, Lieutenant Mira Kane, the liaison from the alien defectors crew, paced the bridge. Her scales shimmered under the dim lights, a remnant of her Vexari heritage, but her posture screamed human tension, shoulders tight, tail flicking like a whip. Admiral Vel'Kor's signaling again. He's demanding surrender, says he'll glass the colony if we don't comply. Alara's jaw clenched. The colony below, New Horizon, humanity's foothold on the fringe world, was no myth, no fairy tale the Admiral had dismissed in his war councils. It was home to 30,000 souls, miners and families who'd clawed a life from the rock. Vel'Kor had laughed off reports of Earth, called them ghost stories from rogue traders. Now, with the Odyssey and her sister ships blotting out his twin sons like an eclipse of wrath, he was learning otherwise. Patch him through, Elara said. The screen split, revealing Vel'Kor's angular face, his multifaceted eyes narrowing in the glow of his command deck. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in agitation, a sound like cracking ice. Human, he rasped, the translator struggling with his guttural tones. Your primitive vessels dare challenge the Dominion? Yield, and I may spare your primitives from the void. Elara leaned forward, her dark hair falling across one eye. Admiral, your scans must show it by now. Earth's no legend. We're here to prove it, and to end your blockade of our trade lanes. Vel'Kor's laugh echoed, a wet rumble. Proof? You block my suns with shadows and expect fealty? My fleet outnumbers you 3-1. Your shield will shatter. The comm cut and alarms blared. Reyes swore under his breath. Incoming barrage. Grav shield dropping to 40. Mira stopped pacing, her claws tapping the deck. We can't take a direct hit. The defectors' intel said their lances have a recharge cycle, 30 seconds. If we feint port, Ilara nodded, already plotting the maneuver. Helm evasive pattern delta. Reyes reroute auxiliary power to forward emitters. Mira coordinate with the wing, have the fighters draw their fire. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. The Odyssey lurched as thrusters fired, twisting away from the plasma streams that lit the void like fireworks gone wrong. Ilara watched the tactical overlay, Kor's cruisers advancing in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like obsidian blades. Human ingenuity had gotten them this far. Jury-rigged drives that outpaced Dominion tech, shields woven from scavenged alien alloys. But grit only carried so far against overwhelming odds. A fighter squadron peeled off, tiny sparks against the dark, diving toward the enemy flank. Explosions bloomed, one Vexery ship listing as its engines vented plasma. But the ploy backfired almost immediately. Kor's vessels adjusted, a secondary wave of drones swarming the human wings like angry hornets. Myra's console lit up with distress calls. Lost 2 fighters, she reported, voice tight. They're adapting faster than we thought. Ilara's plan had hinged on that feint splitting their focus, buying time to reposition the armada and unleash the sunblocker array, a massive solar sail deployment meant to overload their sensors with eclipse glare. But the drones were clogging the approach vectors, forcing the Odyssey to weave through debris. Reyes hammered at his controls, sparks flying from a fried panel. Shield at 20. We need to pull back or... No, Ilara cut in, her mind racing. The colony's fate hung on this. Evac shuttles were lifting even now, but without covering fire they'd be sitting ducks. She thought of the miners below, the ones who'd bet everything on Earth's promise. No retreat. Not today. Full burn on the mains, she ordered. Reyes, overclock the sail deployers. Mira, get me a channel to Vel'Kor. Tell him we're done talking. As the Odyssey surged forward, engines screaming, the first cracks appeared in the grav shield, venting atmosphere in shimmering veils. The twin suns of Kor's system dipped behind the human fleet's silhouette, casting long shadows that swallowed patrol ships whole. Vel'Kor would see it then, the myth made real, humanity's shadow eclipsing his empire. But the cost was mounting. A lance struck true, shearing off a dorsal array in a burst of fire. Ilara braced as the deck bucked, alarms wailing. Reyes glanced up, his face smeared with grime, and gave her a grim nod. They were in it now, no turning back. The sail began to unfurl, a vast wing of mirrored foil catching the starlight, ready to blind the Dominion's eyes. If it worked, it would scatter their formation. But Myra's voice broke through, channel open. He's listening. Ilara straightened, meeting the Admiral's glare on the split screen. Your move, Vel'Kor. Blink first. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The bridge of the UNS Vanguard hummed with urgent whispers from the crew, but her eyes stayed locked on the holographic display. The alien fleet, Vel'Kor's vaunted armada, had scattered like startled insects after the human blockade eclipsed their primary sun. It was a desperate gambit, positioning the massive solar sails of the Allied freighters to cast that unnatural shadow, buying them precious hours. But now, as the shadow began to wane, the first probes were returning data that turned her stomach. Lieutenant Reyes, she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest, report on the Zorathian signatures. Reyes, ever the cautious one, adjusted his glasses before tapping the screen. His fingers moved with deliberate slowness, a habit that grated on Ilara in moments like this, but his precision had saved them before. Admiral's flagship is holding position at the edge of the Umbra, ma'am. But we've got multiple signatures converging. Looks like they're rerouting power from auxiliary ships. If they punch through the interference, it'll be in under 20 minutes. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through contingencies. The Zorathians, with their crystalline hulls that refracted light into deadly beams, weren't built for close-quarters brawling. Humans were. Grit and improvisation had always been their edge, ever since first contact turned into this interstellar standoff. She glanced at Dr. Lena Carr, The xenobiologist huddled over a secondary terminal, her dark hair falling in unkempt waves as she cross-referenced alien physiology with the probe feeds. "Doc, any weaknesses in their formation we can exploit? That shadow play worked once, but Vel'Kor won't fall for it twice." Lena looked up, her eyes sharp behind the fatigue. Witty under pressure, she always had a quip ready, but now her tone was all business. "Their crews rely on solar harmonics for navigation. It's why the eclipse threw them off. But with the light returning, they're syncing up. Hit their command nodes with an EMP burst, tuned to their crystal frequencies, and it'll cascade. Just one problem: our generators aren't calibrated for it yet." The bridge lights flickered as another solar flare from the blocked sun rippled through the void, bathing the displays in an eerie orange glow. Elara felt the ship shudder, a reminder of the stakes. One wrong move and the Vanguard would join the debris field orbiting Zorth Prime. Her crew, 50 souls handpicked for this suicide run, depended on her call. "Calibrate them," Elara ordered, turning to the engineer at the far station. "Petty Officer Hale, reroute everything non-essential. We fire on my mark." Hale, broad-shouldered and brave to a fault, gave a thumbs up without looking away from his panel. "On it, Cap. But if this backfires, we're blind in the dark." The plan crystallized in Elara's mind. A feint with the decoy drones to draw the Zorathian vanguard, then the EMP to shatter their cohesion. It wasn't elegant, but humans didn't win wars with elegance. They won with stubborn refusal to break. As the holographic fleet icons began to shift, converging like a storm, she straightened her shoulders. The shadow was lifting, revealing the alien armada in stark relief, their hulls glinting like shattered diamonds. "Time to remind Vel'Kor that myths had teeth." Reyes's voice cut through the tension. "Incoming transmission, ma'am." "It's the Admiral himself." Elara's jaw tightened. Vel'Kor, the pompous-scaled tyrant who'd dismissed humanity as a fable spun by frontier traders, now faced the reality of Earth's defiance. She waved a hand. "Patch it through, but keep weapons hot." The comms crackled, and Vel'Kor's image materialized, tall iridescent scales framing a face twisted in fury. His multiple eyes narrowed, voice booming with translated menace. "Primitives of the void, your trickery ends. Surrender your worlds or be ground to stellar dust." Lena snorted softly beside her, but Elara met the alien's gaze unflinchingly. "Admiral, we've blocked out your sun once. Imagine what we do when we get angry." She cut the feed before he could retort, signaling Hale. "Drones away. Let's make this myth come alive." The first drone launched with a muffled whoosh, streaking toward the Zorathian line. Alarms blared as enemy beams lanced out, missing the decoy by meters. Elara's heart pounded in rhythm with the ship's engines, each pulse a countdown. The crew moved like a well-oiled machine, Reyes plotting trajectories, Lena fine-tuning the EMP pulse, Hale sweating over the overtaxed circuits. Then, the backfire hit. A Zorathian probe slipped through the drone screen, slamming into the Vanguard's shields with a force that rattled teeth. Sparks flew from a console, and a junior tech cried out as shrapnel grazed her arm. Elara lunged forward, sealing the breach with an emergency kit while barking orders. "Shields at 60%. Adapt the EMP, widen the frequency band." Lena was already on it, her fingers flying. "Got it, rerouting through the auxiliary core. It'll hurt, but it'll work." The shadow fully lifted now, the suns blazing unchecked, casting long shadows across the bridge from the viewport. Vel'Kor's fleet reformed, a glittering wall of death bearing down. Elara watched the drones draw fire, exploding in brilliant fireballs that lit the void like false stars. "One more minute." Hale's voice rose in alarm. "Generators redlining, Cap. We push this and half the ship's dark." "Do it," she said, voice like iron. The EMP fired, a silent wave rippling outward, invisible but devastating. On the display, Zorathian ships stuttered, their crystalline structures fracturing in chain reactions. Beams fizzled mid-shot. Vel'Kor stared at the holographic display, his mandibles clicking in frustration as the shadow deepened across the command bridge. The human construct, that impossible ring of light and metal encircling their primary sun, had tightened its grip, dimming the feeds from the outer colonies. Reports flooded in. Crop yields plummeting on the agri-worlds, power grids flickering on the fringe stations. His fleet, once a gleaming armada of 1,000 vessels, now huddled in defensive formations, their engines humming with unused fury. "Admiral," Lieutenant Sira said, her voice steady but edged with the rasp of exhaustion. She was the witty one, always quick with a quip to cut through the tension, but today her eyes, those multifaceted orbs, darted without their usual spark. "Scans confirm it. The structure's adjusting its orbit. It's not drifting, it's deliberate. They're positioning to eclipse the secondary sun next." Vel'Kor's claws tightened on the armrest of his throne-like chair. Deliberate. The word gnawed at him like a parasite in the hull. For cycles he'd dismissed the old spacer tales of Earth, a rogue world of soft-skinned bipeds who bent physics with their crude ingenuity. Myths he'd called them to rally his officers against the real threats, the Vorath incursions, the failing warp lanes. But now this thing. A halo of habitats and weapons platforms, vast enough to swallow a moon, crude by those same myth-made flesh. How had they slipped past the outer beacons? How had they built it without a whisper? "Options, Lieutenant?" he asked, forcing his voice to remain even. No bellowing orders. That was for lesser commanders. He was cautious by nature, weighing every vector before committing thrust. Sira tapped her console, pulling up schematics that danced like fireflies in the dim light. "We could launch a probe swarm, map its weak points, or hail them again." "Your last transmission got a response." Garbled audio, but it was them. Sounded defiant. Defiant. Vel'Kor replayed the fragment in his mind. A human voice, calm amid static, saying something about diplomacy through demonstration. Arrogance or a bluff. His empire spanned 12 systems, forged through calculated alliances and swift suppressions, not these theatrical shadows. Yet the stakes pressed in. Without the sun's full light, their fusion reactors would strain, and the civilian broadcasts already whispered of panic. One wrong move, and mutiny could bloom faster than the shadow. "Prepare the probes," he decided, rising with a fluid motion that belied his bulk. "But arm them. If this is a siege, we probe for cracks before we strike." Sira nodded, her fingers flying across the controls. Around them, the bridge crew, a tight-knit group of 20 each hand-picked for loyalty and skill, moved with quiet efficiency. Ensign Kale, the young navigator with his impulsive streak, glanced up from his station. "Sir, what if they're not hostile? The myths spoke of traitors, not conquerors." Vel'Kor shot him a look sharp as a laser sight. "Myths also spoke of gods who devoured stars. We act on what we see, Ensign, not what we wish." Kale subsided, but the doubt lingered in the air, thick as the cooling atmosphere. As the probes launched, streaking toward the ring like arrows into the void, Vel'Kor stepped to the viewport. The construct loomed now, a jagged crown against the blazing corona, its segments alive with pinpoint lights, docking bays perhaps or gun ports. A flicker caught his eye, a smaller vessel detaching, human markings glinting as it vectorized toward his flagship. Incoming. His heart, or whatever passed for it in his armored chest, quickened. "Shields up," he ordered softly. "And open a channel. Let's hear what these ghosts have to say." The comms crackled to life, and a new voice filled the bridge, human, accented with a warmth that clashed against the chill of space. "Admiral Vel'Kor, this is Captain Elena Reyes of the Terran Accord. We've blocked your suns to get your attention. Pull back your patrols from the neutral zone and we'll talk. Refuse and the eclipse becomes permanent." Sira leaned in, whispering, "She's bluffing. Our sensors show their power draw spiking, they can't hold it long." But Vel'Kor saw the gamble in her eyes, mirrored in the human's transmission feed. Earned triumph or desperate grit? He hesitated, the weight of his empire balanced on this knife edge. The shadow crept further, and in that moment he wondered if the myths had underestimated not just the humans but him. The dim glow of the command bridge flickered like a dying star as Vel'Kor gripped the armrests of his throne, his chitinous fingers scraping against the worn alloy. Alarms wailed in staccato bursts, cutting through the haze of smoke that curled from shattered consoles. His fleet, once a glittering armada of the Krell Dominion, hung in tatters, debris fields blooming like metallic flowers against the void. Earth's blockade had turned the tide, their improbable vessels weaving through the onslaught with a precision that bordered on precognition. But now, as the human ships regrouped for the final push, Vel'Kor's resolve hardened. He wouldn't yield his homeworld without a fight. "Admiral," rasped Lieutenant Zara, her voice a gravelly whisper over the comms, blood trickling from a gash on her scaled forehead. She was the cautious one, always calculating odds, her eyes darting to readouts even as medics swarmed her station. Their carriers are deploying fighters. Thousands. We can't hold the inner perimeter. Recommend fallback to the orbital defenses. Vel'Kor's mandibles clicked in refusal. Brave to a fault, he'd led charges against greater foes, but this was different. Earth's ingenuity had exposed the Dominion's rigid tactics, their ships like clockwork behemoths outmaneuvered by adaptive swarms. He glanced at Captain Thorne, the human liaison they'd captured weeks ago, now bound but unbowed in the corner, his wry smile a constant irritant. Thorne's people had turned myth into menace, blocking out the twin suns with sheer mass and audacity. No fallback, Vel'Kor growled, his voice echoing through the bridge. We strike the heart. Target their command vessel, the one with the anomalous drive signature. If we cripple it, their coordination fractures. He punched coordinates into the holographic display, a pulsing red line snaking toward the human flagship. Zara hesitated, her claws hovering over the controls, but nodded sharply. Orders rippled out. Engines thrummed to life, the remnants of his squadron lancing forward like desperate spears. As they closed, the void erupted. Human fighters, sleek, darting shadows, swarmed in, lasers stitching the darkness. Vel'Kor's ship shuddered under impacts, bulkheads groaning. A console exploded nearby, showering sparks that danced across his armor. Thorne laughed, a low, bitter sound. You're playing their game now, Admiral. Adapt or die, that's the human way. Zara fired back, her torpedoes blooming into the fray, claiming a dozen foes in fiery blossoms. But the humans adapted faster, their drones shifting formations mid-volley, predicting the Krell vectors with eerie accuracy. Vel'Kor leaned forward, eyes narrowing on the tactical overlay. The command ship loomed, a monolithic silhouette against the eclipsed suns, its hull scarred but unyielding. One more push. For the Dominion. For the stars they'd claimed as their own. The bridge lurched as a direct hit breached the shields. Alarms screamed hull integrity warnings, and Vel'Kor tasted the acrid tang of leaking plasma. Zara clutched her side, whispering firing solutions even as pain twisted her features. We're through, 50 meters. In that instant, the human ship filled the view screen, its point defense guns swiveling to meet them. Vel'Kor triggered the breach charge manually, his mind flashing to the myths he'd dismissed. Earth, a backwater fable now devouring his empire. The explosion rocked them, docking clamps engaging with a metallic screech. Boarding parties mobilized, but deep down he knew, this was no longer about victory. It was survival. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the UNS Vanguard's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the chaos of the Krellian fleet's remnants, twisted hulks drifting in the void, their plasma vents spewing ethereal blue fire. Vel'Kor's flagship, the indomitable Wrath, loomed largest among them, its scarred hull a testament to the brutal hours of skirmishes. But it wasn't the damage that set her teeth on edge. It was the silence from their comms, broken only by the faint, mocking static. Status on the boarding teams? She barked, her voice cutting through the bridge's tension. Lieutenant Ramirez, her tactical officer, wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over holographic displays. Marines have breached the outer hangar, Captain. But they're hitting heavy resistance, automated defenses and those damn Krell shock troops. Sergeant Hale reports casualties at 20% already. Alara nodded curtly, her mind racing. The plan had been straightforward. Cripple the Wrath's engines, force a boarding action to capture Vel'Kor alive. Proof of Earth's existence wasn't enough. They needed him to broadcast the truth to his empire, to shatter the myth that had kept humanity hidden for decades. But nothing about this war was straightforward. The Krell Admiral had anticipated their fate, turning what should have been a surgical strike into a meat grinder. Divert auxiliary power to the breaching charges, she ordered. And get me a channel to Hale. I want eyes on that bridge. The comms officer, Ensign Patel, patched through the feed just as the first images crackled to life. Grainy helmet cams showed corridors slick with coolant and blood, Marines in powered exocets advancing behind energy shields. Sergeant Hale's voice growled over the line, laced with exertion. Voss, this is a fortress, not a ship. We've lost Jenkins to a turret trap. Vel'Kor's holed up with his elite guard, Looks like they're prepping to scuttle the core if we get close. Alara's jaw tightened. Scuttle the core? That would take out half the debris field, maybe ripple back to the vanguard. No way to let that happen. Hale, fall back to secondary access. Use the maintenance fence. Flank them. Ramirez, sync with engineering. Rig a countercharge to stabilize if they blow it. Aye, Captain. Ramirez's confirmation was swift, but his eyes betrayed doubt. The crew had been pushing limits since the blockade began, humanity's ragtag armada holding the line against an empire that spanned stars. Grit alone wouldn't cut it now. They needed a miracle or at least a clever lie. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing across the bridge. Incoming torpedoes from the Wrath's escorts. Patel shouted. 2 no, 4 vectors. Alara surged to her feet. Evasive pattern delta. Fire countermeasures. Full spread. The ship groaned as thrusters fired, twisting away from the glowing trails snaking through the black. Explosions bloomed silently outside, EMP bursts frying the nearest fish, but one slipped through, slamming into the vanguard's flank. Lights dimmed, consoles sparking, and Alara tasted blood from a split lip where she'd bitten it. Shields at 40%, Ramirez reported, steady despite the shake. Hull integrity holding, but we've got a breach in Section 7. Seal it off. Focus fire on those escorts. End this harassment. Alara's hands steadied on the console, her mind flashing to the faces back on Earth. The families betting on this gamble. Vel'Kor had called them ghosts, myths. Today they'd make him see the flesh and bone. Down in the vents, Hale's team crawled through the stifling ducts, the air thick with the tang of overheating circuits. Private Lena Torres, the wiry demo expert, led the way, her breaching tool humming softly. This better work, Sarge, she muttered, her voice echoing in the tight space. I didn't sign up to be a rat in a maze. Hale grunted, checking his rifle's charge. Complain later, Torres. Vel'Kor's the key, get him and the whole empire crumbles. No more hiding in Sol's shadow. A junction loomed ahead, guarded by a sensor grate. Torres planted her charge, the soft whump echoing as it vaporized the barrier. They spilled into a dimly lit corridor, the Wrath's innards groaning like a wounded beast. Krell guards rounded the corner, tall, chitin-armored figures with energy lances crackling. Hale's team opened fire, plasma bolts sizzling against exoskeletons. One guard fell, smoking, but another lunged, its lance grazing Hale's shoulder plate. He roared, tackling it down, fist crashing into its visor until it cracked. Torres covered him, her shots precise, dropping the last. Clear, she panted, helping him up. Blood seeped from a gash, but Hale waved her off. Bridge is 2 decks up. Move. Back on the vanguard, Alara watched the Marines' progress on the tactical overlay, a knot of worry twisting in her gut. The torpedoes were beaten back, escorts reduced to drifting wrecks, but the Wrath's core readings were spiking. Vel'Kor was desperate, cornered. Patel, hail them again. One last chance, surrender or we take him in pieces. The response came not in words, but in a guttural broadcast, Vel'Kor's voice booming through the speakers, laced with alien fury. Primitives. You block my sons, but you cannot eclipse the Krell. The core ignites. Witness your myth's end. Alara's eyes widened. Hale, abort the direct approach. Countercharge now. Torres, you have the shot. In the bowels of the Wrath, Torres sprinted to the core access, Hale covering her rear as Vel'Kor gripped the armrests of his command throne, the polished obsidian digging into his scaled palms. The bridge hummed with frantic activity, consoles flickering like dying stars under the strain of overloaded systems. His fleet, once a gleaming armada of the Krell Dominion, hung in tatters, debris fields marking where pride had shattered against human ingenuity. The view screen dominated the forward bulkhead, its feed from the external sensors painting a nightmare. The colossal silhouette of the human vessel, the Endeavor, blotting out the binary suns of Epsilon Eridani. It wasn't just a ship. It was a monolith, its hull a patchwork of salvaged alloys and improvised weaponry that defied every tactical model in the Dominion's archives. Admiral, Lieutenant Syrah hissed from her station, her frills quivering with barely contained panic. Their boarding parties have breached Deck 7. We've lost contact with the engineering core. If they reach the reactor, I know, Vel'Kor snapped, his voice a gravelly rumble that cut through the alarms. He rose, towering over the crew, his crimson uniform stained with the soot of earlier explosions. Doubt gnawed at him, an unfamiliar ache. Earth-a-myth? The ancient probes had whispered of a primitive world, humans little more than scavengers on a waterlogged rock. Yet here they were, turning his invasion into a rout with tricks born of desperation and raw, unyielding grit. He activated the internal comms, patching through to the remnants of his ground teams on the colony world below. "Captain Thorne," he growled, addressing the human liaison they'd captured weeks ago, a wiry engineer with eyes like sharpened flint. Thorne had been their key, or so they'd thought, feeding just enough intel to lure the fleet into this trap. "Your people have pushed us to the brink. What do you want?" "Surrender terms." The comm crackled, then Thorne's voice filtered through, calm as a still pond. "Admiral, you declared us a myth. Said our ships were fairy tales, our fighters' toys. Now your sons are gone because one of our toys is in the way. We want the colony intact. No more orbital strikes. Pull back and maybe we talk." Vel'Kor's mandibles clicked in frustration. Below, the human resistance had fortified the mining outposts with jury-rigged defenses, magnetic railguns cobbled from excavators, drone swarms reprogrammed from cargo haulers. His drop ships had plummeted into kill zones, pilots whispering prayers to forgotten gods as they burned. And now this. The Endeavor, a retrofitted colony hauler grown into a behemoth through modular expansions, its mass alone enough to eclipse the stars and sow chaos in his formation. "Status on the countermeasures?" He barked at his weapons officer, a squat technician named Grull whose tentacles danced over holographic controls. "Plasma lances are recharging, Admiral. But their shields, they adapt. Every frequency we lock they shift like sand. It's not Dominion tech, it's improvised. Layers of ablative plating over energy fields tuned on the fly." Vel'Kor paced, his boots thudding against the deck. He remembered the briefings. Humans as resilient vermin, breeding fast, innovating under fire. But this was more. Camaraderie forged in the void, crews that fought not for glory but survival. His own warriors, bred for obedience, faltered when plans crumbled. An early assault had backfired spectacularly when human saboteurs overloaded a Krell cruiser's warp drive, turning it into a battering ram that carved through 3 escorts. A shudder rippled through the flagship, Dread Sovereign. Red lights pulsed, another breach. "Boarders on deck 9. Syrah shouted. Vel'Kor drew his sidearm, a sleek plasma pistol humming to life. "Secure the bridge. I'll lead the counter." He moved with the caution of a hunter cornered, his team falling in behind. 6 elite guards, their armor scarred from prior skirmishes. The corridors twisted under emergency lighting, sparks showering from ruptured conduits. They encountered the first humans at a junction. 3 figures in patched envirosuits, wielding compact rifles that spat kinetic rounds. Vel'Kor fired first, his shot vaporizing a panel and forcing them to dive. One human, a woman with a makeshift grenade launcher, returned fire, her projectile embedding in the wall and blooming into a web of containment foam that trapped 2 of his guards. "Flank them," he ordered, diving into cover as bullets whined past. The humans didn't charge. They adapted, one tossing a sensor drone that scanned the layout before exploding in a flash of EMP, frying his team's visors. Blinded momentarily, Vel'Kor relied on instinct, lunging forward to grapple the nearest intruder. The human was lighter, faster, twisting with a wrestler's grip honed in low-grav arenas. They tumbled, fists and claws exchanging blows, until Vel'Kor pinned him, pistol to throat. "Why?" he demanded, breath ragged. "Your world is dust compared to ours. Why fight like this?" The human grinned through bloodied teeth, eyes alight with that infuriating spark. "Because myths don't die easy, Admiral. And neither do we." Alarms wailed anew, reinforcements pouring in from both sides. Vel'Kor released him, signaling retreat as the corridor became a kill funnel. Back on the bridge, Syrah's face was ashen. "Admiral, the Endeavor is maneuvering. They're positioning to ram." He stared at the view screen, the human ship a dark omen against the void. His fleet's cohesion frayed, escape vectors compromised by the eclipse. For the first time Vel'Kor felt the weight of true stakes, not conquest but the cost of hubris. The humans had turned the stars against him and in the shadow his empire teetered. Vel'Kor stood on the bridge of the eternal vigil, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that betrayed the storm within. The view screens flickered with the afterimages of the human armada. Those impossible vessels, woven from alloys that defied every scan his engineers had run. The twin suns of Kreller Prime hung low, their light fractured now by the shadow of the colossal ring the humans had deployed. It wasn't just a blockade, it was a statement etched in steel and fire across the stars. "Admiral," Lieutenant Sira hissed from her station, her crest flattened in submission. "Their transmissions have ceased. But the ring, it's holding position. Structural integrity at 98% on their end. Ours is failing." He didn't turn. The weight of command pressed heavier than the failing gravity fields in the lower decks. Months ago he'd dismissed the whispers of a rogue world called Earth as Terran fairy tales, propagated by fringe scouts to explain away their own inadequacies. Now that myth had materialized, its ingenuity a blade at the throat of the Vexari Empire. The humans hadn't come with declarations of war, they'd come with solutions. Their ring wasn't armed, it was a solar shield, diverting the sun's fury to starve the Empire's plasma forges below. Resource shortage, engineered with precision. "Status on the evacuation shuttles?" Vel'Kor asked, his voice a low rumble. "2/3 away, sir. But the outer colonies report riots. The forges are cold. Without plasma, the nutrient synthesizers grind to a halt. Famine in weeks." He nodded, the motion sharp. The plan had been his. Lure the humans into overextending, then counter with the Vigil's cloaked disruptors. But their adaptation had been swift. When the first strike grazed their lead ship, they'd rerouted power, not to shields but to tractor beams, pulling debris into a makeshift barrier that turned his fleet's own munitions against them. Clever. Earned in the grit of their transmissions, voices laced with exhaustion, yet laced with resolve. A new alert chimed. Sira's claws tapped furiously. Incoming hail. From their flagship. "Captain Reyes. Put it through." The screen resolved into the face of a human woman, her uniform streaked with soot, eyes steady behind a cracked visor. No pomp, no threats. Just fatigue etched in the lines around her mouth. "Admiral Vel'Kor," she said, her voice carrying the faint crackle of strained comms. "We've held the line. Your people are hurting. Ours too, lost 3 ships in the crossfire. But this ring? It's not forever. We built it to buy time, not to bury you." He leaned forward, studying her. Humans. Soft-skinned, short-lived, yet their camaraderie burned brighter than Vexari plasma. "Time for what, Captain? Your myth has eclipsed our suns. What do you demand?" Reyes glanced aside as if consulting shadows off-screen. A murmur of voices. Crew arguing, perhaps deciding under pressure. "Not demands. Terms. Share the tech for our shield arrays. Your empire's got the reach. We've got the grit to make it work against the void storms. Together we push back the real threat, not each other." Vel'Kor's mandibles stilled. The void storms. Those ravenous fronts that had claimed half his kin in the last cycle. The humans knew of them. Of course they did. Their scouts had pierced deeper than he'd admitted. Sira touched his arm, her whisper urgent. "Sir, the ring's emitters are powering down. They're inviting us in." He saw it then on the tactical overlay. Docking ports extending from the human construct, lit with universal beacons. Not conquest. Invitation. The Admiral straightened. "Hail the Council. Tell them the myth is real, and it's offering alliance." His gaze met Reyes. "Captain, prepare to receive our delegation. But know this. Trust is earned in the void, not given." She nodded, a ghost of a smile breaking through. "We've got the scars to prove it." As the Vigil edged toward the ring, Vel'Kor felt the deck hum, not with fear but possibility. The sun's light filtered through the structure, casting long shadows over Kreller Prime. The Empire would adapt as humans had.